Hello everyone, welcome back to Buried Files. Tonight we are diving into 7 of the most disturbing, middle-of-nowhere horror stories ever documented. These are not urban legends or campfire tales meant to entertain. These are genuine accounts from individuals who found themselves in the most isolated places on Earth, where help does not exist and the rules of civilization simply do not apply. When you strip away the comfort of neighbors, streetlights, and cell phone signals, you discover that humanity shares this world with forces and phenomena we were never meant to understand. Each story you are about to hear has been collected from first-hand witnesses who experienced events that defy rational explanation. Some involve encounters with the unexplained that challenge everything we think we know about reality. Others reveal the terrifying truth that the greatest horrors are not supernatural at all, but disturbingly human. These accounts span desolate highways, forgotten farmlands, and abandoned settlements where the line between the living world and something far darker becomes dangerously thin. If you value genuine horror content rooted in real experiences, subscribe to Buried Files right now and activate the notification bell to join our community of truth seekers. After you finish listening tonight, share your own isolated encounters in the comment section below, because your story might be featured next. Now turn off the lights, because we are about to journey into the void where civilization ends and true terror begins. My name is George, and there is a stretch of broken asphalt outside my hometown that I still refuse to drive after dark. I will take the long way around, burn extra fuel, and make whatever excuse I need. Because every time I even see the sign for County Road 19, I feel that same cold weight settling in my chest. People who hear this story like to pretend they would have handled it better, that they would have been braver, smarter, or less selfish. Maybe they would have. All I can tell you is what happened to us out there, in a place where there were no houses, no lights, and for a few minutes, not even the laws of the normal world. Back then, County Road 19 was just our teenage playground. It was where you went when you wanted to smoke without your parents smelling it, where couples parked to make out, where kids like us went to prove how fearless we were. The road ran between endless fields, broken only by a collapsed barn and a rusted-out silo that looked like it would fall over in the next strong storm. You could drive for miles without seeing another pair of headlights, and on clear nights, the stars looked close enough to touch. I had been watching horror content and listening to stories for years, the kind that make other people nervous about small towns and empty highways. It never bothered me. I told myself that horror was just entertainment, that those stories belonged to other people in other places. Where I lived, the scariest thing you usually saw was a deer jumping the fence in front of your truck. So when my friends suggested we go out there one summer night just to get away from everything, I did not hesitate. There were 4 of us in total. I was driving my old pickup, a dented blue thing that rattled if you pushed it above 60. Beside me sat my best friend, Mark, with his feet on the dashboard and a cigarette burning between his fingers. In the back were Tyler and Nate, half lost in the fog of cheap beer and the kind of jokes that only make sense when you are 17. The radio barely got reception that far out, but I kept it low, just enough to drown out the silence that always settles over those fields after midnight. We reached the old barn a little past 1 in the morning. It squatted in the distance like a broken tooth. Its roof collapsed on one side, its windows staring out at the road like empty sockets. We had parked there a dozen times before. Sometimes we would sneak inside and dare each other to climb the ladder to the loft, even though the boards looked ready to give way under a mouse, let alone a full-grown person. That night, we stayed in the truck. It was too hot and too still, and the darkness felt heavier than usual, like there was less space in the cab than there should have been. We killed the engine and let the night wash over us. Crickets screamed in the grass, and the occasional croak of a frog drifted from somewhere near the drainage ditch. A thin strip of moon hung low on the horizon, but it did not give much light, just a pale smear of silver behind the black silhouette of the barn. For a while, we just sat there and talked about nothing. Someone brought up a girl from school, someone else complained about work. It was normal, boring, safe. Then Tyler suggested we see how loud the truck's speakers would go with the doors open. It was stupid, but that was the kind of thing we did. I rolled my eyes, but I did it anyway, turning up the volume until the bass shook the seats and the lyrics blurred into noise. The sound spilled out into the empty fields, an artificial heartbeat pounding against the night. We did not see the lights at first. We felt them. The song cut out mid-chorus. No static, no fade, just silence. The dashboard flickered once, then went dark. The engine was already off, but now every little bit of electronic life in the truck died with it. The only illumination came from the weak dome light in the cab, and even that pulsed like it was struggling to stay alive. "Dude, what did you do?" Mark asked, reaching for the radio. He smacked it with the palm of his hand. Nothing. I turned the key in the ignition. The truck clicked once, a dry sound, and refused to turn over. For a few seconds, that was all it was. An electrical glitch, an old vehicle finally giving up after too many years of neglect. I swore under my breath and tried again. Same click, same dead refusal. Tyler leaned forward from the back, his breath sour with beer. "Battery died?" Before I could answer, Nate pointed past my shoulder. "What is that?" Out beyond the barn, above the line where the fields met the sky, a cluster of lights hung suspended in the darkness. They were not stars. They were too low, too bright, and too perfectly still. 3 pale orbs, hovering in a loose triangle, glowing with a color I cannot quite describe. Not white, not yellow, something in between, like the inside of a fluorescent bulb. For a moment, none of us spoke. The crickets had gone silent. The only sound was our breathing and the faint tick of metal cooling under the hood. "It is a helicopter," Mark said finally, his voice thin. "Probably some kind of survey or something." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But helicopters make noise. They move. These lights did neither. They simply hung there just above the tree line like they were watching. Then they moved. Not forward, not up or down. They slid sideways in perfect unison, gliding over the fields without any visible source, without any change in brightness. It was like watching 3 suns drift across a black ocean. They passed over the barn and then stopped again, directly in front of us, a few hundred yards out. "Okay, that is weird," Tyler whispered. His bravado was gone. I reached for the key again because that was all my brain knew how to do. Turn the key, fix the problem, go home. The truck made no sound at all, not even the faint click this time. It was like the entire electrical system had been carved out and thrown away. "Turn off the interior light," Nate said suddenly. "Just turn it off." I did. The cab dropped into darkness, and for a heartbeat I felt completely blind. Then my eyes adjusted, and I realized the lights outside seemed brighter now, as if they were responding to us. They held still for a second, almost politely. Then they began to descend. I remember the feeling in my stomach more than anything else. It was like cresting the top of a roller coaster right before the drop, except there was no wind, no movement, nothing to justify the sensation. My body knew something was wrong, in a way my mind refused to accept. The lights drifted lower until they hovered just above the ground, spreading out slightly. They were close enough now that the fields around them glowed faintly, revealing the broken fence posts and the twisted metal remains of old farm equipment. There was no structure connecting them. No wires, no frame, nothing. Just 3 floating points of light. "That is not a helicopter," Mark said. The words were barely out of his mouth when the truck rocked, hard. It felt like someone had rammed the back end with a sledgehammer. We all jerked forward in our seats. A second impact followed, then a third, each one harder than the last, as if something invisible was slamming itself into the tailgate. "What the hell is hitting us?" Tyler shouted, scrambling to look out the rear window. I twisted around too, but all I could see was the reflection of those 3 lights smeared across the glass. Whatever was back there was either in the blind spot below the window or not visible at all. The truck shook again, harder, metal groaning in protest. "Go, man, go," Nate yelled. "Just drive." "I am trying," I snapped, turning the key until my wrist hurt. The engine did not even attempt to catch. The steering wheel felt heavy, useless in my hands. Then, as abruptly as it had died, the truck came back to life. Every light on the dashboard flared on at once. The radio shrieked into static, and the engine roared with a violent, choking sound that I had never heard from it before or since. I did something then that has kept me awake at night for years. I climbed over Mark. He had one foot braced on the floor, the other still on the dashboard, and when the truck lurched, he grabbed the door handle with both hands to steady himself. In that chaos, in that blind panic, I shoved him aside, one arm across his chest, using my weight to force myself fully behind the wheel. His shoulder hit the glass with a dull thud. He cursed, but the words were lost under the roar of the engine and the rising pitch of the radio static. I slammed the truck into drive and floored the accelerator. The tires spun for a heartbeat on loose gravel and then caught, hurling us forward. The lights outside did not shrink as quickly as they should have. For several long seconds, it felt like we were not moving at all. Like the world was stuck on one frame. Then, all at once, the truck lurched as if something had let go of it. The speedometer climbed. The barn vanished behind us. "Do not stop," Nate kept saying from the back seat over and over like a prayer. "Do not stop, do not stop, do not stop." I did not plan to. But even with my foot pressed flat to the floor, the lights did not fall away. They rose instead, lifting off the ground and gliding after us, maintaining exactly the same distance. No matter how fast I drove, they stayed right there, hovering just above the ditch on the passenger side, like some kind of escort. We hit 60, then 70. The truck rattled so hard, I thought the doors would shake off. Still, the lights stayed with us. The air inside the cab felt thick, heavy, like we were submerged in deep water. Every breath was an effort. "Turn left up ahead," Mark said suddenly. His voice sounded distant, like it was coming through a wall. "Back to town. Turn left at the intersection." The intersection he meant was the only one on that stretch of County Road 19, the place where the broken asphalt met the newer highway that led back toward town. I fixed my eyes on that point in the distance, on the faint glow of a street lamp I knew stood there. It became the only thing that mattered. Get to the light. As we approached, the lights outside began to drift higher, rising like lanterns on invisible strings. The moment my front tires hit the smoother pavement of the highway, something changed. The static on the radio cut off. The weight in the air lifted. I realized suddenly that the crickets had returned. their chorus loud and almost painfully normal through the open window. I looked to the side. The lights were gone. No gradual fading, no distant retreat into the sky. 1 second they were there, pacing us like predators. The next, there was nothing but dark fields and the faint red glow of my tail lights reflecting off a metal road sign. No one spoke for several minutes. The truck's engine sounded wrong, a little higher, a little strained, like it had been forced beyond what it was built to handle. I eased off the accelerator and let us coast down to a more reasonable speed. My hands left sweaty prints on the steering wheel. Finally, Tyler broke the silence. We saw that, right? We all saw the same thing? No one answered him. I do not know about the others, but I was afraid that if I said yes out loud, it would become more real than I was ready for. We went straight back to town and parked in the lot of a brightly lit convenience store, as close to other people and other cars as we could get. Under those buzzing fluorescent lights, everything felt smaller and more stupid. Strange lights in a field, a truck that would not start. Maybe it had all been some weird electrical storm, some atmospheric phenomenon. That is what I told myself. Then I walked to the back of the truck. The tailgate was bent inward, the metal crumpled in 3 distinct places like it had been struck with enormous, evenly spaced hammers. There were no scratches, no paint transfer, no marks from another vehicle. Just 3 deep, symmetrical dents, each about the size of a human face. We never filed a report. What would we have said? That some invisible thing attacked us in the middle of nowhere? That our old truck suddenly decided to die and then come back to life for no mechanical reason? That 3 lights followed us but left no trace? Instead, we told everyone that we had backed into a post out by the barn, drunk and stupid. People believed it because it was easier than the truth. We let them. A few months later, I stopped going out to County Road 19 entirely. I told myself it was because life got busier, because we all had jobs and responsibilities. That was only part of it. The real reason was that every time I even thought about turning down that road, my skin prickled and my vision filled with that unnatural glow hanging over the fields. Years passed. I moved away for a while. Life changed. I did not talk to Mark as much as I should have. There was always something else to do, some excuse to put off calling. The night I finally picked up the phone for real conversation, it was not him on the other end. It was someone else from back home, asking if I had seen the news. A car had been found abandoned on County Road 19, not far from the old barn. All 4 doors were standing open. The headlights were off. The keys were still in the ignition. The engine was cold. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading away from the vehicle, and no indications that anyone had tried to walk back toward town. The driver and passengers were missing. When they described the location on the broadcast, they used a landmark I recognized immediately. Mile marker, old fence, the silhouette of a collapsed barn. My stomach turned to ice. It was almost exactly where we had parked that night. I tell myself that what happened to us and what happened to them are not related. That is the rational thing to believe, the safe thing. Strange lights in rural areas get reported all the time, and people go missing for countless reasons. The world is big enough for coincidences. That is what I repeat whenever the memory creeps in. But sometimes, when I am driving alone on some unfamiliar back road and the sky looks too empty, I feel it again. That weight in the air, that subtle pressure in my ears, that animal certainty that something is watching. When that happens, I roll the windows up, no matter how hot it is. I keep my hands firm on the wheel. And if I ever see 3 lights hovering over the fields again, I am not going to stop long enough to give them a second look. Because whatever was out there on County Road 19 is still part of my life, whether I like it or not. It lives in the dents we had to pound out of the tailgate, in the silence that fell between me and my friends after that night, in the news stories that pop up from time to time about abandoned cars and vanished drivers. It lives in the way my voice still shakes when I tell this story. Even now, you can tell yourself it was a trick of the eyes, a glitch, a teenage exaggeration. You can decide that I am lying, or that I left out some important detail that would make everything make sense. Believe whatever helps you sleep. Just remember one thing the next time you find yourself on a deserted road with no other headlights in sight. Sometimes, when the world is dark enough and empty enough, something else notices. And if it decides to come closer, there may not be a highway nearby to save you. My name is Isabella, and I used to think the scariest thing about the countryside was how boring it could be. When you grow up surrounded by endless fields instead of city lights, you convince yourself that horror belongs to other places. Dark alleys, crowded trains, crumbling old buildings and big towns. Not to cornfields and dusty roads and old women telling stories on creaking porches. You tell yourself that nothing truly dangerous lives out there. Not really. At least, that is what I told myself right up until the night I learned that the land itself can listen. I grew up on a small farm tucked so far off the main road that most maps ignored it. Our house sat like a little white island in a sea of corn. In every direction, rows of tall stalks stretched out farther than you could see, broken only by a windmill, a rusted water tank, and a leaning scarecrow with a hat that kept blowing away. At night, when the wind moved through the fields, it did not sound like rustling plants. It sounded like whispering, soft, continuous, and just quiet enough that you could pretend it was nothing if you tried hard enough. My grandmother lived with us, and she never pretended. She was the kind of woman who carried old fears the way other people carried heirlooms. She had a story for every strange sound, every misplaced object, every small accident that might make someone else laugh. When the floor creaked, she said the house was stretching its bones. When the dogs barked at nothing, she said something unseen was passing along the road. And when the wind rose at dusk and the fields began their constant hiss of dry leaves, she would sit a little straighter and look out the window as if listening for words inside the noise. "There are places you do not treat like they are yours," she told me once when I was 12, her fingers wrapped around a chipped mug of tea. Fields, woods, riverbanks, some places belong to things older than fences and deeds. You walk through them, but you do not own them. And you do not call out your name after dark, not out there. I laughed at her then. I tried to hide it, but she saw the smirk and narrowed her eyes. "You think I am trying to scare you?" she said. "I am not. I am trying to keep you whole. The field listens. You give it your full name and it keeps it. That is all it needs." "Who taught you that?" I asked, still half amused. She stared past me, out toward the corn, where the last light of the setting sun was turning the stalks into a wall of black teeth. "Some things you do not need to be taught twice," she said. "It only takes one mistake." It became one of her rules after that. No full names in the fields after sundown. If she heard me or my younger cousin shouting anything more than a nickname, she would call us back with such urgency that we obeyed without thinking. I did not believe her, not really, but I respected the edge in her voice. Old people are allowed their rituals. The summer I turned 16, my cousin came to stay with us for a few weeks. His name was Liam, and he was the kind of 13-year-old boy who treated every rule like a personal insult. To him, the farm was an enormous playground, full of opportunities to test his courage. To me, it was just home. I had learned where the holes in the fences were, which corners of the field stayed muddy even in drought, and how to tell when a thunderstorm was rolling in just by the way the air tasted. On the day it happened, the heat sat over the land like a weight. Even the flies seemed too tired to buzz. We spent most of the afternoon moving slowly from shade to shade, waiting for the sun to dip low enough that the air did not feel like soup. When evening finally came and the light turned soft and gold, I suggested we walk between the rows to check for fallen stalks and raccoon damage. It was a chore, but it felt less like work and more like an excuse to move without melting. We stepped into the field as the sky slid from orange to purple. The corn was at full height, taller than both of us, and once you were a few rows in, the house disappeared completely. The world narrowed to a path of packed dirt and the close, dry rustle of leaves brushing your shoulders. The smell of earth and green things was heavy, almost comforting. Liam ran ahead, kicking clods of dirt, making sound effects like he was in some kind of movie. I trailed behind, brushing the leaves aside, checking for broken stalks, grateful for the shade. The air between the rows was cooler, denser. You could hear your own footsteps like they were happening in another room. "Hey, Isa," he called over his shoulder, his voice bouncing oddly through the plants. "What is that thing Grandma said about names?" "Do not say your full name out here after dark," I replied automatically. "She thinks the field remembers it." "That is so dumb," he said immediately. "It is just corn." "What is it going to do, call us later?" "Just do not yell it," I said. "She will hear you somehow, and then I get the lecture too." He turned it into a game right away, the way kids do. He started whispering my name, stretching it out, making fun of the seriousness in my tone. "Isabella," he hissed, dragging his fingers across the leaves like he was writing the syllables on them. "Cut it out," I said, unable to keep a small smile from tugging at my mouth. "Seriously?" "Fine," he said. "Then I will just say mine." He tipped his head back and shouted his full name into the sky, every syllable sharp and clear. The sound flew up and over the corn, into the twilight. It rang longer than it should have, stretching out like the field itself had decided to carry it a little farther. "Liam, stop it," I snapped. Harsher this time. "The neighbors will hear you." "We do not have neighbors," he laughed, not close enough to care. He shouted his name again, louder. The echo came back, but it was wrong. The sound that returned was thicker, slower somehow, as if it had been dragged through something on the way back. It was like listening to a recording played on a dying battery. I told myself it was just the way the sound bounced between the rows, but my arms prickled with goosebumps despite the heat. The wind had died completely. The leaves no longer moved unless we touched them. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" he said, grinning like he knew exactly what I meant and did not want to admit it. "Nothing," I muttered. "Come on, we need to head back." Instead, he sprinted deeper into the field, his sneakers thumping on the packed dirt. I had to jog to keep up, the path turning, the sense of direction slipping as the rows curved slightly around the property line. It was easy to get turned around in there, but I still felt confident. I had walked those paths 1,000 times. We reached a clearing of sorts where the rows widened around a shallow depression in the ground. My father said it had once been a pond before they drained it. The soil there always seemed darker, richer, and the corn grew taller. It also felt quieter. like a pocket of stillness where the outside world had trouble reaching. Liam stopped in the center and raised his arms dramatically. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I will now anger the eldritch corn gods." "Shut up," I said, but I was laughing a little again. Fear and amusement kept trading places inside my chest. He shouted his name one more time, louder than before, putting every bit of his voice into it. The sound climbed up and out, echoing in jagged fragments between the rows. Then something answered. It started as a repeat, the way echoes do. But halfway through his name, the tone changed. The last syllable came back slower, elongated, and much deeper, like someone older and much larger was trying the word on for size. My heart stumbled. Liam's grin faltered. "You heard that?" I said quietly. He nodded once, his eyes slightly wider. But before we could move, the voice came again. This time there was no pretense of echo. It came from somewhere ahead of us, deeper in the corn. It said his name, clearly, calmly, in a voice that did not belong to anyone I knew. It was not quite human. The cadence was wrong, the emphasis off, like someone speaking a language they almost understood. Leaves rustled in front of us, even though there was no wind. The narrow path seemed to open between the rows, stalks bending aside as if something was moving through them without touching the ground. The dirt at our feet trembled, very slightly. "Run," I whispered. Liam did not. His face had gone slack, his eyes fixed on the dark corridor opening in front of us. "Did you hear that?" he murmured. "It knows my name." The voice said it again. Closer now. The sound crawled under my skin. It was deeper still, almost pleased. There was a texture to it, like something wet being dragged over dry stone. I grabbed his arm and tried to pull him backward, but his body resisted, leaning just enough toward that opening that I had to use both hands. The corn around us loomed taller, the leaves suddenly sharp against my bare arms, leaving thin scratches. "Liam, we are going back," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Now, I am not playing anymore." He turned his head slightly, and for a second I saw something unfamiliar in his expression. Not defiance, not fear. Something like curiosity, but thinner, stretched tight over something else. "She said the field listens," he said. "Maybe it is just listening." The voice spoke again, but this time it did not say his name. It said something else in a language I did not recognize, a string of sounds that made my teeth ache. At the same moment, the corn on either side of the path shivered violently, as if invisible hands had brushed them all at once. Every instinct in my body went from nervous to screaming. I yanked on his arm with everything I had. For one heartbeat, we struggled like that, my feet slipping in the dry dirt, his weight drawn toward the gap. Then I made the mistake of looking behind us. I thought I heard something there too. A faint rustle, a suggestion of movement. Panic flared, and I let go of his arm for 1 second to glance over my shoulder. The path behind us looked the same as always, just dirt and stalks and the narrow slit of darkening sky above. When I turned back, he was gone. The depression in the ground was empty. The path ahead was still open, the leaves swaying slightly as if something had just passed through them. There were no footsteps, no sound of running, no cracked stalks to show where he might have gone. "Liam," I called, my voice cracking. "Stop it. This is not funny." Silence fell like a weight. Then, from somewhere within the corn, very far and impossibly near at the same time, the voice said his name again. It sounded satisfied. I backed up slowly at first, then turned and ran. The rows blurred on either side of me. Leaves slapped my face, tangled in my hair. The ground seemed to tilt, every step threatening to twist my ankle. The whole time, I could hear whispers around me, layered and soft, like many mouths repeating the same word over and over. His name rolling through the field. By the time I burst out into the open yard by the house, my lungs were burning and my arms were crisscrossed with thin, red scratches shaped like tiny fingers. My grandmother was on the porch, already halfway down the steps, her face pale and tight. "Where is he?" she demanded. I opened my mouth to answer and realized I did not have one. Not one that made sense anyway. He was there, and then he was not. The field opened, and then it closed. Something called him, and he listened. Search parties combed the property all night. Men with flashlights and dogs walked every row. They found nothing. No torn clothes, no blood, no sign of a struggle. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed him whole. The police asked questions. Did he run away? Did he talk about leaving? Did anyone have a reason to hurt him? I answered honestly. But none of it mattered. Without evidence, all they had was a boy who walked into a field and did not walk out. My grandmother did not go into the corn again after that. She watched it from the window, her mouth set in a thin line, like someone staring at a longtime neighbor who had finally shown its teeth. When people came by with sympathy and casseroles, she accepted both. But when they whispered that it must have been an accident or a kidnapping, she simply shook her head. "It took him," she said to me once when we were alone. "I told you. It listens." Over the next weeks, I started to hear him. The first time was at dusk, and the sky was the same purple as the night it happened. I stood on the porch, hugging myself against the cool air, and the wind began to move through the corn. The whispering rose, just like always. But beneath it, I heard his voice. Faint, stretched thin, as though it had to travel a long way to reach me. He called my name once, then his own. Like he was trying to remind me who he was, I froze. The sound came from deep within the field, from nowhere I could point to. Just a thin line of words riding on the wind. After that, it became a pattern. At the exact time the sun disappeared, I would hear him. Sometimes he called my name. Sometimes he just repeated his own, over and over, the way he had done that night before everything changed. Other times, he tried to say more, but the words broke apart at the edges, eaten by the hiss of the leaves. I never called back. I wanted to. Every part of me ached to answer. To run into the field and drag him home, to prove that the rules could be undone. But I remembered the way the leaves parted, the way the voice had wrapped itself around his name, like it was trying it on. I remembered my grandmother's face. Years passed. We stopped planting corn on that part of the land. My parents blamed the soil, the yield, the economy. I knew better. We put soybeans there instead, then wheat. The footprint of that old depression stayed, though. In satellite photos, it showed as a darker patch, a place where the ground was still different. I moved away eventually. Cities, jobs, strangers. Life layered itself over the memory until I could go weeks without thinking about it. But sometimes, on hot summer nights, when the air in the city goes still and heavy, I swear I can hear a sound that does not belong there. Not cars, not air conditioners, not people. Just the faintest whisper of leaves and a boy's voice, every syllable stretched thin with distance, calling his own name from a place where maps do not reach. I have never again spoken my full name into an open field after dark. I do not care how silly it sounds or how much anyone laughs. There are places that listen. There are places that remember. And once you give them a piece of yourself, you do not get to choose what they do with it. My name is Harry, and I used to pick up hitchhikers because I thought it made me a decent person. I drove long hauls for years, mostly overnight routes where the road stretched empty for miles, and the only company you had was whatever came through on the radio or crawled into your passenger seat. I told myself I was helping people who had run out of options, giving strangers a second chance when the world had left them stranded. That belief died on a desert highway somewhere between two forgotten towns, at a place marked only by a faded green sign that read, Mile Marker 43. It was late August, the kind of night where the heat does not break just because the sun goes down. The air shimmered over the asphalt even at midnight, and my truck's air conditioning struggled to keep up. I had been driving for 6 hours straight, pushing through a stretch of highway that cut across flat, empty land, where nothing grew except scrub brush and the occasional twisted Joshua tree. Gas stations were rare. Houses were rarer. For long stretches, the only proof that other people existed was the occasional set of taillights disappearing over the horizon, or a distant glow that might have been a town, but turned out to be a transmission tower. The radio had given up an hour earlier, dissolving into static no matter how many times I turned the dial. I did not mind the silence. It gave me time to think, or more accurately, time to not think. That was the appeal of these routes. You pointed the truck in one direction and let your mind go blank until something forced you to pay attention again. That something turned out to be a man standing on the shoulder near mile marker 43. He was not waving, not holding a sign, not even facing the road. He stood perfectly still with his back to me, dressed in work clothes that looked too heavy for the heat. Dark jeans, a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, and boots caked in pale dust. A duffel bag hung from one hand, the kind made of canvas with a drawstring top. It sagged with weight. I should have kept driving. Every part of my training, every late-night news story, every half-remembered warning from people who knew better than I did, told me to keep my foot on the gas, my eyes forward. But I had spent the last 6 hours alone, and some stupid part of me thought that maybe this man needed help. Maybe his car had broken down. Maybe he had been walking for miles. Maybe I could be the one good thing that happened to him that night. I slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder about 20 feet ahead of him. The truck idled, headlights cutting through the dark and illuminating a stretch of cracked pavement and dry grass. I rolled down the passenger window and leaned across the seat. "You need a ride?" I called out. He did not turn around right away. For a few seconds, he just stood there, motionless, like he had not heard me. Then, slowly, he rotated his body toward the truck. His face was hard to make out in the dim light, shadowed by the brim of a faded baseball cap. But I could see enough to note that he was older, maybe 50, with a thick build and hands that looked like they had seen years of manual labor. He did not say anything. He just walked to the passenger side, opened the door, and climbed in. The duffel came with him, resting on his lap. He settled into the seat, closed the door with a soft click, and stared straight ahead through the windshield. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He did not answer. The silence stretched long enough that I started to wonder if he had heard me at all. I shifted the truck back into drive and eased onto the highway, figuring that if he wanted to talk, he would talk. Some people are just quiet. I could respect that. The miles rolled by. The engine hummed. The broken white lines on the road blurred together in the headlights. I tried the radio again out of habit. but it was still dead. I glanced sideways at my passenger a few times, looking for some clue about who he was or what he was doing out here. He never moved. His hands stayed wrapped around the top of the duffel, fingers pale against the dark fabric. His face stayed locked forward, unblinking. After about 10 minutes, he finally spoke. "Do you believe in second chances?" His voice was flat, stripped of inflection, like he was reading from a script he did not care about. It caught me off guard, and I fumbled for an answer. Yeah, I said. I mean, I think everyone deserves another shot if they are trying to do better." He nodded slowly, as if considering my words with great seriousness. Then his hands moved. He unzipped the top of the duffel, just a few inches, enough for me to see inside. I only caught a glimpse before he zipped it back up. But it was enough. Rope, thick, coiled and stained dark in places where something had soaked into the fibers. Next to it, the edge of a tool, something heavy and metal with rust eating at the edges. My brain tried to make sense of it, tried to find an innocent explanation. But my hands tightened on the steering wheel and my pulse kicked into a higher gear. "What is that for?" I asked, keeping my voice as even as I could. He looked at me for the first time since getting in the truck. His eyes were flat, empty in a way that made my stomach turn over. "Messes," he said. "Out here you can dig without anyone asking why. You can fix things that should not have happened. People judge what they find without knowing what came first, the pain or the act. Do you understand?" I did not. Or maybe I did, and that was worse. My mouth went dry. Every instinct I had screamed at me to pull over, to shove him out, to do something. But we were still in the middle of nowhere, miles from the last town and miles from the next. If I stopped here, I would be alone with him in the dark. If he decided I was a problem, there would be no one to hear me, no one to find me, until days later, when another driver noticed the abandoned truck. "Where exactly do you need to go?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. He leaned back in his seat, one hand still resting on the duffel. "There's a turnoff about 5 miles ahead. Dirt road, no sign. You will see it if you are paying attention. I left something unfinished out there. You can help me finish it." "I am running low on gas," I lied. "I need to stay on the main highway or I will not make it to the next station." His expression did not change, but something shifted in the air between us. The easy stillness became something heavier, more deliberate. "You are not low on gas," he said quietly. "I can see the gauge from here." My heart hammered. I pressed down on the accelerator just slightly, trying to make it look natural. The truck sped up. The white lines came faster. In the distance, maybe 10 miles out, I could see a faint glow on the horizon. A rest stop, a gas station, something with lights and other people. It became the only thing that mattered. "I really think I should stay on the main road," I said, louder now, abandoning the pretense of calm. "I have a schedule. People are expecting me." He watched me for a long moment, then reached into his jacket. My entire body went rigid. I was sure he was pulling a weapon, sure that the next few seconds would decide whether I lived or died. Instead, he pulled out a folded piece of paper, old and stained, and placed it on the dashboard. "This is where it is," he said. "If you do not take me, I will find another ride. But it would be easier with you. You seem like someone who understands mistakes." I did not look at the paper. I kept my eyes locked on that distant glow, willing it to get closer, faster. The man shifted in his seat, and I felt something press lightly against my ribs. Not hard, just a suggestion of pressure, a reminder that he was close enough to hurt me if he wanted to. "You are making this harder than it needs to be," he said. His voice had not changed. It was still flat, still calm. But underneath it, I could hear something fraying at the edges. "I am not taking you off this highway," I said, and my voice cracked on the last word. For a long, terrible moment, he said nothing. Then he leaned back again, the pressure disappearing from my side. He folded his hands over the duffel and stared out the windshield like he was watching something I could not see. "You missed your turn," he said softly. The glow ahead resolved into shapes. A rest stop, one building, a few scattered lights, and a single semi-truck parked near the far edge of the lot. It was not much, but it was enough. I swung into the lot without signaling, tires crunching over gravel, and laid on the horn. The sound split the night. The man did not react. He sat perfectly still as I brought the truck to a hard stop near the building. Headlights aimed at the glass doors. A figure moved inside, someone behind a counter looking up in surprise. "Get out," I said, my voice shaking now. "Get out of my truck." He turned his head slowly, looked at me one last time, and smiled. It was not a cruel smile. It was worse than that. It was understanding, almost sympathetic, like he felt sorry for me. "You missed your turn," he repeated. Then he opened the door, stepped down with his duffel, and walked away from the light, disappearing into the scrub and the dark like he had never been there at all. I sat in the truck for a long time, shaking, waiting for my heart to slow down. The attendant inside eventually came out to check on me, asking if I was okay, if I needed help. I told him I was fine, just tired, just needed a minute. He nodded and went back inside. I did not tell him about the man. What would I have said? That I picked up a stranger who talked about digging and messes and unfinished business? That he disappeared into the desert with a bag full of rope and rust? It sounded insane even in my own head. I pulled back onto the highway and drove until the sun came up. I never stopped at mile marker 43 again. I never picked up another hitchhiker. And 6 months later, when I saw a news report about remains found in a shallow grave near that stretch of road, I turned off the television and tried very hard not to think about the man who had ridden 27 miles in my passenger seat, asking me if I believed in second chances. My name is Poppy, and I learned the hard way that some places do not want you to leave. Not because they are haunted in the way people think of ghosts and cold spots and flickering candles, but because they are hungry. Hungry for company, for attention, for someone to fill the silence that has stretched on too long. I found that out in a crooked little cottage at the end of a road that did not appear on any map I checked. In a place where the rent was so cheap, it should have been a warning all by itself. I was 23 and completely broke. My last job had ended badly. My roommate had kicked me out with 2 weeks' notice, and I was sleeping on a friend's couch while scouring rental listings for anything I could afford. Most places wanted first month, last month, security deposit, proof of employment, references, and a credit score that did not look like mine. I was about to give up and move back in with my parents when I saw the ad. Small cottage, 1 bedroom, utilities included, quiet location, first month half off, no deposit required, call anytime. It was almost too good to be true, which meant it probably was. But I called anyway. The landlord sounded older, tired, like he had been hoping someone would call but was not particularly excited about it. He gave me the address and told me I could move in immediately if I wanted. No background check, no questions. Just sign the lease, and the place was mine. The drive out there took longer than I expected. The main road turned into a smaller road, which turned into a gravel path, which eventually became little more than 2 tire tracks through overgrown grass. Trees pressed in on both sides, thick and dark, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out most of the sky. My phone lost signal about halfway there, and I had to rely on the directions I had scribbled on a scrap of paper. When I finally reached the clearing, I understood why the rent was so cheap. The cottage looked like it had been forgotten by time. It was small, barely bigger than a garden shed, with peeling white paint and a roof that sagged in the middle like a broken spine. The windows were grimy, the porch tilted at a slight angle, and the front door did not sit flush in its frame. Weeds grew up through the steps, and a rusted mailbox leaned at the end of the driveway like it was too tired to stand up straight. But it was mine. That was all that mattered. I moved in with 2 suitcases and a sleeping bag. The inside was better than the outside, barely. The walls were thin, the floors were uneven, and every step produced a groan that sounded like it was coming from somewhere else in the house. The single bedroom had a narrow bed with a stained mattress, and the bathroom had a mirror so old that my reflection looked gray and blurred. The kitchen consisted of a hot plate, a mini fridge, and a sink that dripped no matter how tightly I turned the handle. Still, it was quiet, peaceful even. No neighbors, no traffic, no shouting through the walls at 3 in the morning. Just me and the trees and the steady creak of old wood settling. The first few nights were normal. I unpacked, cleaned as much as I could, and tried to make the place feel like home. I noticed small things that seemed off, like doors that would not stay closed unless I wedged something under them, or the way the floorboards would groan on the opposite side of the room from where I was standing. I chalked it up to an old house doing old house things. Then I started talking to myself. I have always done that. When you live alone, it helps fill the silence. Little comments about the weather, complaints about how cold it was at night, muttered curses when I stubbed my toe on the corner of the bed. Harmless. Normal. Except the house started talking back. The first time it happened, I was in the kitchen making tea. I said something out loud, something like, "God, it is freezing in here," just filling the air with sound. And from somewhere in the walls, I heard a soft rustling, like paper being crumpled, followed by a faint whisper that might have been words. I froze, tea kettle in hand, listening. The sound faded. I told myself it was pipes, wind, the house settling. But it happened again the next night. I complained about the draft coming through the window, and I heard that same rustling sound, followed by a low murmur that seemed to move through the walls. This time it was closer, almost like someone was standing just on the other side of the plaster, trying to respond, but not quite able to form the words. I tested it. I stood in the middle of the living room and said, "If something is here, knock twice." Silence. Then, from the bedroom, 2 slow, deliberate knocks. My skin went cold. I walked to the bedroom door, which I had left open, and found it closed. I did not remember closing it. I opened it slowly, half expecting to see someone standing inside. But the room was empty. The knocks had come from the far wall, the one that faced the outside, where there was nothing but trees and darkness. I should have left then, packed my things, called the landlord, driven back to the city, and dealt with the couch and the shame and whatever else came with admitting I could not handle being alone. But I did not. Because, as strange as it was, as unsettling as those knocks and whispers were, they made the isolation feel less crushing. For the first time in weeks, I did not feel completely alone. So I kept talking. I told the house about my day, about the job interview I had coming up, about how much I hated the cold. And the house listened. Sometimes it responded with soft sounds in the walls. Sometimes it knocked. Once, I found the word "stay" written in the condensation on the bathroom mirror, traced in shaky letters like a child had drawn it with their fingertip. I told myself it was fine. It was just a quirk of the place, something to laugh about later. But the responses grew bolder. When I said I was lonely, the bedroom door slammed shut so hard the frame shook. When I muttered that I felt trapped, every cabinet in the kitchen flew open at once, the doors banging against the walls in unison. The breaking point came when I said, half joking, half serious, "I feel like this place is keeping me here." The bedroom door, which I had wedged open with a chair, slammed shut. The chair skidded across the floor and fell over. From inside the walls, I heard a chorus of whispers, overlapping and urgent, repeating the same word over and over: mine. I started packing immediately. I did not care about the lease, the deposit I did not pay, or the consequences. I threw clothes into my suitcase, grabbed my phone charger, and headed for the front door. It would not open. The handle turned, the lock clicked, but the door stayed shut like it had been nailed from the outside. I tried the windows. They would not budge. I tried the back door. Same thing. Every exit was sealed. Panic set in. I grabbed a chair and swung it at the living room window. The glass did not break. It did not even crack. The chair bounced back, nearly hitting me in the face. I screamed, pounding on the door, kicking at the frame, begging for it to let me out. The whispers grew louder, filling the house, coming from every direction at once. They were not angry. They were pleading, desperate, like the house itself was afraid of being empty again. I do not remember falling asleep, but I woke up on the floor in the middle of the living room. My packed suitcase sat beside the front door, which was now standing wide open. Morning light spilled across the porch. The whispers were gone. I did not wait to see if the door would close again. I grabbed my things and ran. I threw everything into my car, started the engine, and drove without looking back. The trees seemed to close in behind me as I left, branches scraping the roof, like the road itself did not want me to go. When I called the landlord later to tell him I was not coming back, he sighed like he had heard it all before. "How long did you last?" he asked. 3 weeks, I said. "That is longer than most," he replied. "The house does not like to be alone. Items left behind tend to disappear before the next tenant arrives. It is like the place does not want to share." I never went back for the things I left. A few books, some kitchen supplies, a jacket I liked. I told myself they were not worth it. But sometimes, late at night when I am alone in my new apartment, I hear a faint rustling in the walls. And once, just once, I found a message written in the steam on my bathroom mirror. It said, "Come back." I moved again 2 weeks later. I do not talk to myself anymore. And I will never, ever rent a place that cheap again. Because some houses do not just want tenants, they want someone to keep. And if you are not careful, you might be exactly what they have been waiting for. My name is Arthur, and this story is not about what happened in the middle of nowhere. It is about what refuses to stay there. People think the worst part of guilt is the memory, the moment that plays over and over in your head until you can recite every detail like a script. But that is not the worst part. The worst part is when the memory starts showing up in places it should not be. In cities far from where it happened, in rooms where snow never falls, in the corner of your vision when you are certain you are alone. The worst part is when you realize that some debts follow you no matter how far you run. When I was 25, I took a job with a road crew working on a remote stretch of highway up north. It was seasonal work, the kind that paid well because nobody else wanted to do it. We stayed in a cabin that the company kept for workers, miles from the nearest town, accessible only by a single unpaved road that turned into a nightmare when the snow came. The cabin was bare bones. 2 bedrooms, a wood stove, a generator that coughed and sputtered every time you tried to use it, and walls so thin you could hear the wind scraping across the roof like fingernails on wood. There were 2 of us assigned to that posting. Me and a guy named Miller. He was older, maybe 40, with the kind of face that looked like it had been carved out of stone and left unfinished. He did not talk much, which suited me fine. We worked our shifts, ate in silence, and spent our evenings on opposite sides of the cabin. Him reading old paperbacks and me listening to static-filled radio stations that faded in and out depending on the weather. It should have been simple. Get through the winter, collect the paycheck, move on. But isolation does things to people. It strips away the parts of you that know how to be civil, how to share space, how to swallow your frustration when someone leaves the door open too long or uses the last of the coffee without mentioning it. Small irritations become arguments. Arguments become something worse. The night it happened, we had been snowed in for 3 days. The storm had come down hard and fast, burying the access road under 5 feet of powder and turning the world outside into a wall of white static. The generator had died that morning, which meant no heat except for what we could coax out of the wood stove, and we were running low on dry firewood. Tempers were already stretched thin. Miller had been drinking. So had I. Cheap whiskey from a plastic bottle, the kind that burns going down and makes every emotion sharper, louder, harder to ignore. I do not even remember what started the argument. Something about the firewood, maybe, or whose turn it was to check the generator. It does not matter. What matters is that it escalated. Voices got louder. Hands started shoving. I told him to back off. He told me to grow up. I pushed harder. He swung. I ducked. We were both drunk, both angry, both too stubborn to stop. The fight spilled out onto the porch and then down the steps into the snow. He slipped. I saw it happen in slow motion, the way his boot caught the edge of the icy step, the way his arms pinwheeled trying to catch his balance. He went down hard, the back of his head striking the corner of a rock that jutted up through the snow like a tooth. The sound it made was soft, almost polite. A dull crack like snapping a dry branch. He did not get up. I stood there, breathing hard, steam pouring from my mouth in ragged clouds. The snow fell around us, thick and silent, already starting to cover the disturbed ground. I called his name. He did not answer. I crouched down, shook his shoulder. Nothing. His eyes were half open, staring at something I could not see. Blood darkened the snow beneath his head, spreading slowly, turning the white into a sick, watercolor red. Panic hit me like a fist. I told myself it was an accident. He slipped. It was not my fault. But I was drunk, and we had been fighting, and his blood was on my hands in a way that felt more literal than I wanted to admit. I looked around, as if someone might be watching, even though we were miles from anyone. The storm howled. The trees bent under the weight of snow. The world was empty. I should have gone for help. I should have called it in, explained what happened, taken whatever consequences came. But I was young and drunk and terrified, and I convinced myself that going out in the storm would be suicide. The road was buried. The nearest town was 10 miles away. I would freeze before I made it halfway. That is what I told myself. That is the lie I wrapped around the truth until I almost believed it. Instead, I dragged him. His body was heavier than I expected. Dead weight, that is what they call it. And the phrase had never felt more accurate. I pulled him around the side of the cabin, through the snow, until I reached the back where the drifts piled high against the wall. I told myself I would come back for him in the morning. I told myself I would make this right once the storm passed. By morning, the world was buried in white. The storm had dumped another 2 feet overnight, smoothing out every surface, erasing every track. Where I had left him, there was only a shallow depression in the snow, a place where the white seemed to sink lower than it should, as if something beneath was still shifting. When the crew chief came to check on us a week later, I lied. I said Miller had taken off in the middle of the night after our argument, that I assumed he had tried to walk to town. The chief looked at me for a long time, then looked at the snowdrifts, then shook his head. No one wanted to deal with the paperwork. No one wanted to mount a search in those conditions. The story stuck because it was easier than the truth. I left that job at the end of the season and never went back. I moved south, then farther south, chasing warmth and distance. I told myself that if I could just get far enough away from the snow, from the cabin, from that shallow depression behind the wall, I could leave it all behind. But it followed me. The first time it happened, I was living in a small apartment in the city, 3 states away from where Miller died. It was winter, and snow had started to fall. The kind of light, harmless flurries that melt as soon as they hit the ground. I came home from work, unlocked my door, and stopped. There were wet boot prints in the hallway. Large, heavy prints. The kind left by work boots caked in slush. They led from the front door to my bedroom and then stopped, as if someone had walked in, stood by my bed, and then vanished. I lived alone. The door had been locked. There was no snow in the stairwell, no trail leading up from outside. Just those prints, drying slowly on the hardwood, filling the apartment with the smell of wet leather and cold air. I told myself I had tracked them in earlier and forgotten. But I had not worn boots that day. I had not been anywhere near snow. The prints appeared again a month later, and then again. Always on nights when it snowed, always leading to my bedroom. Once, I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps pacing in the hallway outside my door. Slow, heavy, deliberate. The rhythm was familiar. It was the same way Miller used to walk when he was restless, when he could not sleep and would stomp around the cabin trying to shake off the cold. I moved again, this time to a place where it never snowed, where the temperature stayed above 70 even in January. I thought that would be the end of it. No snow, no footprints, no reminders. I was wrong. I woke one night to find my bedroom filled with mist. Thick, gray, and cold enough that I could see my breath. It smelled like pine trees and gasoline, the exact smell of the cabin. And there, beside my bed, pressed into the thin layer of frost that had formed on the floor, was a single wet boot print. I do not sleep well anymore. I keep the lights on. I avoid mirrors because sometimes, late at night, I see movement behind me in the reflection. A shape that stands too still and watches too long. I hear him in the walls, pacing, waiting, reminding me that some things do not stay buried no matter how deep the snow falls. I dream about the cabin. I dream about the depression in the snow, the way it seemed to sink lower every time I looked at it, as if the ground beneath was hollow. I dream about reaching down to brush away the snow and feeling a hand reach up to grab mine, cold and rigid and impossibly strong. People talk about guilt like it is something you carry. They are wrong. Guilt is something that carries you. It picks you up and drags you back to the place you tried to leave, over and over, until you understand that distance means nothing. You can run to the other side of the world, but the moment it snows, the moment the air turns cold, the night goes quiet. You will hear those footsteps again. You will see those prints. You will feel that hand on your shoulder, shaking you awake the way he used to when it was my turn to stoke the fire. I do not know what he wants. Maybe he wants me to go back. Maybe he wants me to confess. Maybe he just wants me to remember that he is still there, waiting in the cold, in that shallow grave I dug with panic and lies. All I know is that he has never stopped walking, and no matter where I go, he always knows how to find me. My name is Daisy, and I used to love driving at night. There was something peaceful about being alone on empty roads while the rest of the world slept. Nothing but headlights and white lines and the hum of the engine to keep me company. I worked as a courier, taking packages between small towns that most delivery companies ignored. The pay was decent, the hours were flexible, and I got to avoid people, which was exactly what I wanted. I have never been good with crowds, or small talk, or the 1,000 little interactions that make up a normal day. The road was simple. The road made sense. Until the night it stopped making sense at all. It was late September, and I had just finished my last scheduled delivery when dispatch called with an urgent pickup. Someone needed a package delivered to an address about 90 miles out, in a region I did not usually cover. The route would take me through flat farmland, the kind of place where the only landmarks are grain silos and the occasional farmhouse set back from the road by a quarter-mile of dirt driveway. I hesitated, but the pay was double my usual rate, and I needed the money. I took the job. The first hour was normal. I followed the highway out of town, watched the street lights thin and disappear, and settled into the rhythm of driving. The radio played classic rock until the signal faded, and then I switched it off and let the silence fill the van. My GPS showed the route clearly. Stay on the main road for 60 miles. Take a left at County Road 14, follow it for another 20, and I would reach the address. Simple. Except when I reached the turnoff, my GPS glitched. The screen flickered, went black, then came back showing a recalculating message. The route changed. Instead of County Road 14, it directed me onto a narrow dirt road with no name, no signs, and no markings on my printed map. I pulled over and checked the address again. The GPS insisted this was the correct route. I looked at the map. The road did not exist. I sat there for a few minutes, engine idling, trying to decide what to do. I could turn around, call dispatch, and tell them I could not find the place. But that would mean losing the extra pay, and I hated the idea of failing at something so simple. The dirt road stretched out in front of me, pale and empty under the moonlight. It did not look dangerous. It just looked forgotten. I turned onto it. The road was narrow, barely wide enough for one vehicle, with tall grass pressing in on both sides. The van bounced over ruts and stones, and dust rose in clouds behind me, visible in the rearview mirror. The GPS kept recalculating, the route shifting slightly every few minutes, as if it could not decide where I was supposed to go. I told myself it was just a glitch, that I would reach the address soon and laugh about how paranoid I had been. But the farther I drove, the stranger things became. The fields on either side were empty, no crops, no livestock, no signs of life. The air smelled wrong, flat and stale, like it had been sitting still for too long. I passed a leaning fence post, then another, and realized they were the only things breaking up the endless stretch of dead grass. There were no farmhouses. No lights in the distance, no other roads branching off. Just the single dirt track stretching forward into darkness. Then I noticed the light in my rearview mirror. It was high, far too high to be headlights from another car. It hung in the air behind me, a single bright point that looked almost like a star, except it was too low and too steady. I slowed down, thinking maybe it was a helicopter or some kind of tower light I had not noticed before. The light slowed with me, maintaining the exact same distance. I sped up. The light sped up. I slowed again. It slowed. It was following me. My hands tightened on the wheel. I tried to tell myself it was just another vehicle, someone else lost on this strange road. But no headlights looked like that. No vehicle moved like that, perfectly smooth, without bouncing or swaying. It just hung there, glowing, watching. I decided to pull over. If it was another driver, they could pass. If it was something else, well, at least I would know. I eased the van onto the shoulder, put it in park, and waited. The light stopped too, hovering at the same distance, maybe 100 yards back. It did not move forward. It did not turn. It just waited. I opened the door and stepped out, my legs stiff from sitting too long. The night was silent. No insects, no wind, no distant hum of traffic. Just a heavy, oppressive quiet that pressed against my ears. I looked behind me, shielding my eyes from the glare of the light. There was no road there. The dirt track I had been driving on simply ended, giving way to an open field of unbroken grass. My tire tracks faded into nothing, as if I had driven off the edge of the world. I turned back toward the van, my heart pounding. The light pulsed once, a slow, deliberate throb, and I felt something inside my head. Not a sound, not words, but a pressure, like someone was trying to push a thought into my skull. It was invasive, wrong, and it made my vision blur at the edges. I stumbled back toward the van, fumbling for the door handle. The moment I climbed inside and slammed the door, the pressure disappeared. I threw the van into drive and floored it, not caring where the road led, just needing to move. The light stayed behind me, pulsing in rhythm now, like a heartbeat. My own pulse matched it, and I realized with growing horror that I could not slow my breathing down. It was like something outside my body was controlling the rhythm. I drove blind, no sense of direction, no idea how long I'd been moving. The GPS was useless, flickering between routes that made no sense. The road seemed to twist and fold in ways that defied the flat land around me. And then, without warning, I was somewhere else. I blinked, and suddenly I was pulling into a gas station I recognized from hours earlier, the one I had stopped at before taking the job. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A tired attendant stood behind the counter, staring at his phone. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly as it had been. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. Only 10 minutes had passed since I left this same gas station. 10 minutes. I had been driving for over an hour. I checked my fuel gauge. I should have burned a quarter tank. It had barely moved. I sat in the parking lot, shaking, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I pulled up the dash cam footage, the one I always kept running for insurance purposes. I rewound to the moment I turned onto the dirt road. The video showed me driving on the highway, and then it cut to static. Thick, rolling static that hissed and crackled for several minutes. Then it jumped forward to me, pulling into the gas station, panicked and sweating, with no record of the road, the light, or anything in between. I quit the courier job the next day. I told dispatch I was moving, changing careers. Whatever excuse sounded believable. I did not tell them about the road, or the light, or the missing time. Who would believe me? I barely believed it myself. But it did not end there. A week later, my phone rang in the middle of the night. I did not recognize the number. I answered anyway, half asleep, and heard nothing but silence on the other end. No breathing, no static, just an empty line. I was about to hang up when I heard it. A low, rhythmic hum, steady and hypnotic, matching the pulse of the light I had seen in the rearview mirror. I hung up immediately and blocked the number. It called again the next night, and the night after that. Always at the same time, always the same hum. I stopped answering. But the calls kept coming, weeks turning into months, and now I do not even need to pick up to hear it. Sometimes, late at night when the world is quiet and I am alone in my apartment, I can feel that pressure again, pushing at the inside of my skull, trying to make me remember something I do not want to remember. I have tried researching the road. I looked at satellite images, old maps, county records. There is no dirt road where I turned. There is only forest and empty fields, unbroken for miles. The GPS route I followed does not exist. The address I was supposed to deliver to was never real. I do not know what I drove into that night. I do not know what followed me or why it let me go. But I know it is not finished with me. I can feel it sometimes, late at night when I am driving alone and the road gets too empty. I can feel it watching from somewhere just out of sight, waiting for the moment I make a wrong turn, when the GPS glitches again and suggests a road that should not be there. And when that happens, when I see that dirt path stretching out into darkness and my phone starts to ring with that same pulsing hum, I know I will have a choice to make. I can keep driving forward, pretending I do not see it, hoping it will leave me alone. Or I can turn onto that road again and find out what it wants. I do not think I will like the answer. But part of me, the part that felt that pressure inside my head and heard that hum in my heartbeat, knows that eventually I will not have a choice. It is waiting for me. And one day, when the world is dark enough and empty enough, I will find myself on that road again, with no memory of how I got there and no way to turn back. That is the thing about the middle of nowhere. It does not stay in one place. It moves. It follows. And when it finds you, it does not let go. My name is Rosie, and I once drove until I ran out of anger and gas, ending up in a town that may or may not have really been there. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like exhaustion, like a breakdown, like something my mind invented to cope with the fight I was running from. Maybe it was. But that does not explain the key with my initials carved into it, or the people who spoke in voices I had heard before, or the way every road I tried looped me back to the same intersection no matter how many times I turned. It does not explain why, even now, years later, I still feel that place waiting for me just beyond the edge of the map, patient and hollow and hungry. It started with a fight, the kind that strips away every polite word you have ever learned and leaves only the raw, ugly truth underneath. I do not even remember what it was about anymore, just the feeling of walls closing in and the desperate need to be anywhere else. I grabbed my keys, slammed the door, and drove. No destination, no plan, just motion and distance, and the hope that if I went far enough, the anger would burn itself out. I took smaller roads, then smaller ones, avoiding highways and streetlights and anything that felt like civilization. The sun dropped lower, painting the sky in shades of rust and bruise, and the landscape turned into endless stretches of flat, nothing broken only by the occasional tree or power line. My fuel light came on just as the last of the daylight bled away, leaving me in that strange gray hour where the world has not decided whether to be day or night. That is when I saw the sign. Faded green metal, half hidden by overgrown weeds, with white letters that spelled out a name I did not recognize. No population number, no distance marker. Just the name and an arrow pointing down a narrow road that looked like it had been forgotten by the county maintenance crew decades ago. I turned onto it because I had no choice. The fuel gauge was deep in the red, and the next town on my map was another 20 miles. This place, whatever it was, would have to do. The road was paved but cracked, with grass growing through the seams. It curved gently through a sparse stand of trees and then opened into a main street that looked like it had been pulled from a photograph taken 50 years ago and left to fade in the sun. There were buildings, a diner with a neon sign that flickered weakly, a church with a white steeple, a row of houses with sagging porches and peeling paint, and a motel with a vacancy sign that buzzed like a dying insect. But there were no people. No cars moving, no lights in the windows, just stillness, thick and oppressive, like the whole place was holding its breath. I coasted into the motel parking lot, my engine coughing as the last of the fuel ran dry. I sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel, trying to decide if I should lock the doors and sleep in the car or risk going inside. The motel office had a light on, pale and yellow, spilling across the cracked pavement. A hand-painted sign in the window read, "Open." I got out. The air smelled wrong, not bad exactly, just empty, like it had been recycled too many times and lost whatever made it feel alive. My footsteps echoed too loudly on the concrete. I pushed open the office door, and a bell above it rang. Shrill and too cheerful for the silence that followed. No one was behind the counter. The office was small, cluttered with outdated calendars and faded postcards pinned to a corkboard. A guest register sat open, the pages yellowed and brittle. I called out, "Hello?" and my voice fell flat, absorbed by the walls like sound was not supposed to travel here. Then I saw the key. It sat on the counter, alone, attached to a wooden tag with a number 3 carved into it. Beneath the number, in smaller, rougher letters, were 2 initials. My initials. RS. I picked it up slowly, turning it over in my hand. The wood was old, worn smooth by years of handling, but the letters looked fresh, like someone had carved them recently. I told myself it was a coincidence. RS could stand for anything. Maybe the previous guest had the same initials. Maybe the motel reused tags, and this one just happened to match. I took the key because I was too tired to care and too stubborn to sleep in my car. Room 3 was on the ground floor, the door warped and sticking in the frame. I had to shove it open with my shoulder. Inside, the room smelled like dust and old fabric. A single bed with a faded quilt, a nightstand with a lamp that did not work, and a bathroom with a mirror so streaked I could barely see my reflection. It was depressing, but it was shelter. I lay down without bothering to undress and fell asleep almost immediately. But sleep did not bring rest. I dreamed I was walking through the town, past the diner and the church and the rows of silent houses. Every door I passed was slightly open, just wide enough for me to see darkness inside, and from that darkness I heard whispers. Not words, just the shape of words. Familiar but wrong, like listening to a conversation through a wall. I woke to the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth in the room directly above mine. I lay still, listening, my heart pounding. The footsteps moved from one end of the ceiling to the other, stopped, then started again. I remembered the clerk at the front desk, the one who had not been there. I remembered the empty parking lot. There should not have been anyone else in this motel. In the morning, I went back to the office. This time, someone was there. A woman, middle-aged, with tired eyes, and a face that looked vaguely familiar in a way I could not place. She smiled when she saw me, but it did not reach her eyes. "Did you sleep well?" she asked. "There was someone in the room above mine," I said, "walking around all night." Her smile did not change. "You are the only guest." I stared at her, waiting for her to explain, to admit she was wrong. But she just stood there, patient and blank, like she was waiting for me to accept something I did not want to understand. I left the office and walked into town. The diner was open now, though I had not seen anyone unlock it. Inside, a man sat at the counter drinking coffee. He looked up when I entered, and for a moment I thought I recognized him. Not his face exactly, but the way he held his cup, the angle of his shoulders. It reminded me of someone I used to know, someone I had fought with before I left. "Morning," he said, and his voice was almost right, almost familiar, like an impression of someone I had heard 1,000 times. I ordered coffee I did not want and sat by the window. Outside, the street was still empty, but now I noticed details I had missed the night before. A porch swing moving gently back and forth, even though there was no wind. A newspaper on a stoop with a date from 3 years ago. A help wanted sign in the diner window with my job title printed in faded ink. I tried to leave after that. I walked back to my car, determined to push it if I had to. But when I turned the key, the engine started. The fuel gauge showed a quarter tank, even though I had run completely dry the night before. I did not question it. I just drove. But every road I took brought me back. Left turn, right turn, straight through the intersection, it did not matter. Within minutes, I would find myself passing the motel again, the church again, the diner again, like the town was a loop I could not escape. I stopped at the four-way intersection in the center of town and screamed. No one came, no one answered. The buildings stared back at me, patient and indifferent. That is when the woman from the diner appeared beside my car. I had not seen her approach. She was just there, standing close enough to touch the window, her lips moving without sound. But I heard her anyway, not with my ears, but inside my head, clear and soft and terrifying. Some people drive here because they cannot bear who they are anywhere else. If you stay long enough, you will forget the road that led you in. I drove straight at the intersection, ignoring the sense of repetition, ignoring the way the same landmarks passed by again and again. I focused on the feeling of motion, on the hum of the engine, on anything that felt real. And then, suddenly, I was somewhere else. A busy highway, horns blaring, headlights flashing past me. I was back in the world. I pulled over and sat on the shoulder, shaking, crying, not entirely sure if I had imagined everything or if I'd somehow escaped something that should not have let me go. Later, I tried to find the town on a map. I searched online, checked atlases, called the county office. No one had heard of it. The road I remembered turning onto did not exist. Satellite images showed only forest and empty fields where the town should have been. According to every official record, I had driven through nothing. But I know it was there. I still have the key. It sits in a drawer in my apartment, the wood warm to the touch, no matter how cold the room gets, the initials carved deep and permanent. And sometimes, late at night when I am angry or scared or desperate to run, I feel the pull. I feel that hollow town waiting for me, just beyond the next wrong turn, with a vacant room and a key already marked with my name. I do not drive when I feel that way anymore. I stay home. I turn on every light. I remind myself that some roads do not lead anywhere you can come back from. But the key is still in the drawer. And part of me, the part that wanted to disappear that night, knows that one day I might pick it up again. One day I might drive until I run out of anger and gas and reasons to stay. And when I do, the hollow town will be there, patient as always, ready to loop me back into its empty streets until I forget why I ever wanted to leave.